So I don't think I've ever talked about YA on this channel, and that's because I don't usually read it. But recently, over my holidays, I read a ton, which was a bit weird for me because the last time I was on a holiday, I was reading Malazan, Book of the Fallen. Just a series of really adult themes, full-on intense writing, and just massive books. And this time on my holiday, I was smashing through Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman's YA series and having a really surprisingly good time. So I want to take a second just to talk about YA. Talk about 4 YA series in particular. One is middle grade, but it's the best series of the ones we're talking about today. So I really wanted to highlight it as it's a series I love, but I haven't had the chance to just rave about on this channel. So I wanted to take the opportunity to. Then of the other 3, 2 of them are the YA series by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. Aurora Cycle, which is 3 books I read in a week, which are good books that I wouldn't recommend to many people, but there's still a lot of things I want to say about them. And then the Illuminae Files by the same authors, which were incredible and I would recommend for a lot of people, with just a slight warning about the immature tone. And is one that I took way too long to read myself. So if you haven't read The Hunger Games yet, you should probably just close the video and go do that. Because I didn't read The Hunger Games until last year, and that was a mistake. I wish I'd read it 10 years sooner. I'd probably be much more well read by now if I had, because it's just a phenomenal read and it probably would have got me reading much more. So I just want to talk a little bit about why I find that so great and why you should check it out if you haven't already, if you're one like me that just didn't get into it when it was a thing and kind of forgot about it. But starting off this video, I wanted to ask you for your YA recommendations, as it's a genre I think I'm going to read just a little bit more of this year. I'm going to stick mostly to my darker adult fantasies with heavier themes and things centered for adult audiences and denser writing styles that you have to take your time with. But because I like these things so much, sometimes you do need a little bit of a break from the darker stories. And not that YA doesn't have a place for being dark, like the death count in some of the books I've been reading are off the charts. Actually, probably some of the higher body counts are from the YA series I'm going to be talking about today, but just some things that are a bit easier to read and aren't aimed at younger audiences. I know it's a bit of a debate what actually is YA and what isn't, like the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson, written as an adult fantasy, but some call a YA because the main character's young. So I'm not going to get into that debate, because as long as you're getting the book that you think you're getting, that's what genre needs is. That's all you need to worry about with genre is, do you know what sort of read you're getting when you're getting into a new book? Does it help you to pick your next read? Whether you want to call Mistborn YA or adult fantasy, doesn't really change what the story's about. You just need to know what the story's about and if it's for you or not. But we are looking at books that are aimed typically at younger audiences with a character coming of age, typically with those sort of coming of age things of just what being an adult looks like and what characteristics you might want to be thinking about when you're looking at your future. But these are also stories that look at a lot of different things. So I'll start off with the weakest series I want to talk about today, which is the Aurora Cycle by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. So this is their YA space opera series, centered around a group of 18-year-old graduates at a United Worlds sort of organization where they kind of are the peacekeepers for all these different alien species. So our cast isn't all human. We've got a few different aliens. They're a bit of the outcasts in this academy, like none of them really fit in anywhere, and they've ended up finding each other. So we've got that found family thing sort of going on, but whilst these guys start their first mission, they end up being in the center and having to basically save the entire galaxy across this trilogy. There's a lot of elements of time travel, and what this series reminds me most of is Star Wars Rebels. It's aimed at that same sort of age group where these stories feel very young, these characters feel very young, but there's some really nice things that can still work for an older audience. So although the characters are very much like caricatures where they, each character is very different, they have their own thing that they're going through, so we can explore lots of these coming of age sorts of things, of finding your place and making sure there's a character fit that everyone can relate to. So we get a good variety of voices in this series, and each of the authors writes a few of the characters themselves. So the cast feels fantastic. Despite them being like kind of one-note characters, they're also very good and very well done characters that all have a very unique voice. They all sound different because they are written by different authors. It's fun picking out which of the characters J. Kristoff wrote because you can still find his prose and find his humor in there, which I adore. And there's just some paragraphs in there where he just lets his prose get flowery and you just feel like you're reading Empire of the Vampire again. But then there's just some sassy teen trying to save the day, making some, like cringy, immature humor, which wasn't great, but the world building of this series, the characters and the writing were all really well done. The writing was beautiful. It was, easy to read YA prose, but there was just that little bit of floweriness that just brings a smile to my face and just really brings the world to life a little bit more. The weakest part of this series for me, and the thing that dropped this to like a 3.5 out of 5 sort of series, was the plot. There was a few little things that were just a little bit too convenient. I'm not a big fan of time travel in stories, and there's a lot of time travel in this. So for me, time travel ruined Endgame. So I think I'm a bit unique in this, where a lot of other people don't really mind too much time travel. So you'll probably have a good time with it, more so than me. Then there was one other thing in the plot where there was a reveal in book 2 that was plainly obvious from book 1, but they kept building it up like this was some big thing that we weren't expecting, which, come on. So that annoyed me a little bit. But if you are looking for something to remind you of the animated Star Wars TV shows that we grew up on, like Star Wars The Clone Wars, like Star Wars Rebels, this is definitely something you should look into and think about checking out. Then the other series by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman that I've talked a lot about on this channel recently, the Illuminae Files, this is one I would recommend to a lot of people. If you are looking to break out of a reading slump and you need something new, fresh, something that you can fly through in a couple of sittings, the Illuminae Files is going to be that for you. These books are told through a series of hacked documents. So you're not just reading regular writing on a page. This is much more like Dracula, but a sci-fi YA version where the story is told through chat rooms and chat logs, email communications, onboard propaganda on the spaceships, spaceship to spaceship communications, and AI's thought logs, a really messed up AI, an AI that's thinking about the trolley problem, where if you take one life to save 5, that's the moral thing to do. Well, would you take 1,000 lives to save 1,001 lives? That's what our AI is thinking about. This AI has a lot of power and they are a character in themselves, absolutely phenomenal. The story that the Illuminae Files is talking about, telling us about this far distant mining colony that lives on the fringes of society that got attacked by a big evil space corporation, basically. But luckily there was a few Union research ships nearby to grab a few refugees and flee through space. That's where our story picks up. We basically get some sassy teens saving the day. The dialogue in this series is incredibly fun. If you just love a little bit of cheeky romance, a lot of banter, a lot of really good back and forth, this is the series for you, because a lot of the story is told through the dialogue of our characters talking to each other, our characters reading out loud a video recording of an events that happened. So you get a lot of their personalities in this story. Everything is vital to the story. Every single document and file in the Illuminae Files leads to building the speaker story, so you're not bored at any moment. It's very easy to read because of the writing style, also done with a full cast, so the audiobook is phenomenal. It's a really common recommendation to immersive read this, where you're reading the book and listening to it at the same time. That does work great. I also like to just doing the audiobook by itself, and I also like to just reading it by itself. I think all are great options, and they also did a full cast for the Aurora Cycle series, so you can't go wrong with any of these, both audio or reading them. And tone-wise, the Illuminae Files read a lot more mature than the Aurora Rising series, where it felt like these characters were like right on the verge of 18. They felt a bit more adult, and there was just a little bit of the immaturity, a little bit of the love triangle sort of stuff. And it's just a really fun series that I do recommend checking out if you don't just mind that little bit of immature tone. Then the next series I want to talk about is a middle grade low fantasy, and it's pretty much a no fantasy series outside of the first book. It's more just like a alternative historical fiction sort of thing, and that's the Rangers Apprentice series by John Flanagan. The series that got me reading, and a series that, despite being written for a middle grade audience, adults can have a lot of fun with. My sister in her 30s is currently revisiting these books and flying through them like a book every 2 days. These are short reads that you can fly through that have just some really wholesome characters and some really good themes in some very fun stories. Now for me, Rangers Apprentice feels like a combination of the Farseer trilogy and the Bloodsworn saga meeting in a YA written story. These are books that early on explore just the themes of hard work, courage, bravery, envy, jealousy, friendship, but very quickly in the next couple of books in the series delve into slavery, drug addiction. John doesn't back off the difficult topics in these books. There are just absolutely emotional, there's absolutely emotionally devastating scenes, just things that are crushing, deep explorations of loss across the 12 books in the initial series of the Rangers Apprentice. We don't just have a perfect main character that's good at everything. Will, our main character, is a flawed human. He isn't great. You see him make mistakes and you get to see him grow and develop, and watching his journey is entertaining, and watching his friend's journey is entertaining, and watching his mentor grow and develop still as an older person is super interesting. So about this story, this is a story set in a world very similar to our own, kind of in a kingdom copying medieval England. Will is a ward of the state, and book one starts off with him being accepted into the Rangers Guild to be a Rangers Apprentice. And the Rangers in this society are kind of like spies, but they also are very good with strategy and doing like detective sort of work. They are kind of on the fringe of society, so not too many people know what the Rangers are, what they do, how they work. They're kind of mysterious. They wear these mottled coats so they can fit into the background and, you know, kind of like camouflage, blend into things. They can sneak around very well. And in the first couple of books, we're dealing with people trying to come and conquer the kingdom that we're currently in, and Will just being around the events of that, helping out, trying to fight back. His friends are there, and he's someone with a smaller build. So particularly when I read this growing up, I was always on the shorter side right until I was like at the end of high school. I don't know why my growth spurt just waited so long. So I was able to connect to Will really well. But I think everyone's going to be able to find a little bit of themselves in this main character or in the people around him. And he gives us a little bit of a different POV to our regular sort of heroes in the story. He's more on the outskirts. He's not trying to be the center of attention, saving the day. He's just trying to make sure bad things don't happen. He's in the background with his bow and arrow and his sax knives. He's not in the middle of the action with a sword hanging out there, but he is just one courageous dude, just always trying to do the best. He gets put through it. I have never cried more from a book than the ending of book 2, The Burning Bridge. I don't think any book has made me cry before, except for that book. That was just absolutely crushing, emotionally devastating. My mum was driving a car at the time I was finishing that book, and she was like, "What is my son doing? He's just in heartbreak." It is a fantastic series. If you want something to break up your big reads, if you just want to get a nice on-the-ground medieval story with some mystery, some action, some characters that are a bit flawed, you should check out The Rangers Apprentice. It's just a delight, and I'm so happy I read those books growing up. Now, lastly, The Hunger Games. I did not read that until I'd fully grown up. I read it for the first time last year, and much like when I read the Aurora Cycle, I read these in a week. I binged them. I read The Hunger Games in a day. I sat down for a drive, put on the audiobook, and listened to it through in one sitting. I don't know why it took me so long to read these books, and no, I didn't watch the movies when they came out either. So I was going into this completely fresh. I was just expecting Katniss to just wipe the floor with everyone that got in her way, and her to just lead a rebellion to wipe out this oppressive government system that is in place in this dystopian society. Well, that was not the case. Katniss is a teenage girl. She doesn't have all the capacities to save the day. She's highly competent, incredibly genuine, incredibly caring, and just a person you want to cheer for. And she just wants to look after her family and not cause any trouble. But she gets swept up into this rebellion after the initial battle royale in book 1, and people are trying to use her from both sides. People are getting in her way. It's averted a lot of the things that I thought was going to happen, and it just made a super compelling story, written in a style that is very easy to read, but very engaging. The pacing for these books was really nicely done. I was just hooked to the page the whole time. I just needed more. The exploration of the themes of the way this society was run was very interesting. I won't dive too deep into this because in my research for this, I was watching the book guy's video on why the Hunger Games was so popular, and he really dives into the themes in there. I think you should go and watch his video if you want a deeper dive into the Hunger Games. But this is not a series I expected to love as much as I did, and I can see why this is a series everyone should read. It's not just a YA book, it's a book for everyone. So guys, please let me know what YA series I need to check out next. I have had a really good time recently with these Kristoff books. The Hunger Games blew me away last year. What is going to blow me away this year? Give me something that's just going to avert all my expectations. Let me know what your favorites are. Thank you so much for watching, and just have a great day.